Hi to everybody over there in Atlantis. Thanks so much for inviting me to your Henry Lincoln Day. And thanks especially to Geraldine and Barley, and thanks for inviting me to do this. It's going to be great fun, I'm sure. Hello to Clive and Lynn if you're there. Really looking forward to seeing you at the Mysterious Earth Conference in September. We're all up and running for that as well. And hello to everybody else who's just at the event. So as you've probably already been told, I'm Neil MacDonald. I run the Megalithic Tours. And I've been taking tours to, on the Cathar tour as I call it, which is to the area around Rennes-le-Château where Henry Lincoln based all his work. And I've been doing that now for over 20 years. It's been quite a big part of my life really, so I'm going to enjoy doing this for you. In fact, I just got back a couple of days ago from the Cathar country, and whilst I was over I took one or two photos and some video footage for this, so you'll get an idea, if I put this on first, you'll get an idea of what the area is actually like, where Henry Lincoln did his work, Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, etc, etc. And then what I'll do is I'll follow on by talking about my most recent observations, which I've put in the book that I did with Thomas Sheridan, which is called Bérenger Saunière, Priest Wizard of Rennes-le-Château. So that brings us right up to date then. So this is the Café de Jardin, just in the middle of Rennes-le-Château, just opposite the church and the presbytery. And this is where I used to see Henry quite a lot. He'd be sat here with his groups, and I would come in with my groups. And just here is a sign commemorating Henry himself. There you go. A little plaque about Henry saying, "You look, but can you see?" in memory of Henry Lincoln, 1930 to 2022. You can look, but can you see past all the misdirection? The cafe here is absolutely first class. I recommend the deep fried camembert served with fries to dip. So here's the church at Rennes-le-Château, the very thing itself. And just to the side here, you see a little circular room that has no entrance apparently, but the way you get to it is through a cupboard in the priest robing room next to it. And here's the monument to Billard, his good friend, the Bishop of Carcassonne, and his boss. And then to the other side, this is where he put the pillar support upside down with Mission 1891 on it. I'm saying that's where he thinks is a royal mission, to recover the secrets of the Blanchefort family. So above the church, again at Rennes-le-Château, the famous Terribus ex Loxus Iste. This place is terrible, or awesome, or as Henry Lincoln said, associated with Solomon's Temple. So this is the famous statue. There's Asmodeus and the salamanders, and then you've got the angels, and at the top, Rosicrucian cross. It's a shame now that Asmodeus has to be within his confined little area there, because his head had been smashed a couple of times in the past. So they've had to put him back inside his protective environment, so it doesn't happen again. It's such a shame. That's the bas relief on the the hill of Fleuret, the flower family, and at the other end of the church is the altar, showing Marie in a cave just down the road. And there's Marie in a cave. It's allegedly just down the road, down the 610 from Blanchefort. This is the entrance to the cave. It really is quite big inside and quite homely. And the painting there is done by one of the local groups that meets there. So inside Saunière's domain, we've got the original altar support there with the mission 1891 upside down, the originals in the garden. But the important thing is the nightstone with all the Carolingian carvings. This was the very stone that Saunière pulled up to uncover the chapel, the script beneath it, and that's the point where he became massively rich. So this is the pulpit support, where Saunière found the parchments, allegedly, in this notch. Took them off to Paris for translation to Saint-Sulpice. In this room, spookily enough, you can still hear Henry's disembodied voice.
And he was the first to begin spreading this little local treasure story, the story which is now so famous around the world. You'll find a brief outline of that story in Blanchefort.
This is Saunière's domain. This is his huge garden which he fitted. What's the bottom part of it? There's another part above. We'll look at that in a minute. But this is where he had exotic plants and animals from throughout the world. A real pagan garden. So Saunière built a Villa Bethania, and when the bishop removed him from business, this is a little chapel that he built to use himself. Well, this is the Villa Bethania, but he never lived in here. This was literally just for his guests. It's a fine house it is too. For the area at the time, this would have been a mansion. And so he just built it. He had a lot of loose cash. You know, with Saunière, look at that little room there. And there's the front door. So there's the orangery, and this is the other aspect of Saunière's domain, or pagan garden as I like to call it. Imagine all the exotic plants and animals from around the world, and imagine all the banquets that he held here. And that's the Tour Magdala at the other side. But whatever Saunière was doing, he certainly loved the view. This is the view from the platform in Saunière's domain. Look at that, isn't it beautiful? There's that's Montezel across where he was born. So he's a lad from just across the valley. So, what a beautiful place. Even though it's a bit cloudy today, but still, it's lovely. So we had this walkway built between the two towers. It's kind of a theme, the two towers, Tolkien-like. So there's the Tour Magdala. And when he died, apparently, they had him in repose on a chair, just right around here in the middle, he said. And lots of people arrived from out of the village who they didn't know. Loads of people, and they all came up one end of the passageway, the walkway, walked across, took a tassel off his garment, and then disappeared. So why would they do that? Why was this? It was like a little ritual. We'll think about that one. So inside the Tour Magdala, this was Saunière's, this is his library, it was his office. He had all these wooden structures made to house the books, and it had thousands of books in here, all individually bookbinded by an official bookbinder from Toulouse, who came to live with him while he did the work. And this is also the place where the two strange gentlemen came to visit him just before he died. I'm filming this from the top of the Tour Magdala. It's a beautiful garden, isn't it? I'll let it play through so you can see the whole thing and the views that surround it across the old valley as well. Sonia demolished 6 houses to get the room to build this domain, and it must have been so incredibly special to him. But there's more to this than meets the eye. And Sonia didn't work alone. There were 2 or 3 priests in the area which were his tightly knit compadres. This is where one of the other priests who got murdered, I think was Antoine Gellis. I'm just looking here straight across the valley to Rennes Chateau, so Custoza was overlooked by Father Saunière. Here's the Custoza castle, or what's left of it, the Chateau de Custoza. I just started repairing it, but that's a hell of a job that is. Anyway, Father Gellis, his presbytery town, he was found there with 14 head wounds, and he'd been beaten to death on the night of Halloween, October the 31st in 1897, and the murderers had put him in the position of a priest in repose. This is his grave. He had 20,000 francs around around his presbytery, so they obviously weren't robbing him, and he'd been living in fear, he said, for years. He kept his shutters closed all year round. Again, we've got the Rosicrucian flower, and we see we've got Antoine Gellis, and it says in his grave, assassin. He was assassinated. It is so strange that so many of these priests and people involved with Sonia's domain ended up getting murdered under strange circumstances. Man, not so much you can get murdered under unstrange circumstances. So this is the graveyard in Rennes-les-Bains where Henry Boudet, the priest friend of Saunière, was based. It was a bit like Saunière was the rising light of the whole secret up on the hill of Rennes-le-Chateau. Boudet was down here, being secretly involved, but secretly in the valley. And this is a strange thing in the graveyard. If we look over at this grave here, if you can see the grave with a pointy cross, a cross there with a pointer, and if you follow that pointer upwards, there's a ball on the roof of the church, and then right at the top of the hill there's a cromlech. And if you carry on that straight line across, you end up at Rennes-le-Chateau. Now that's strange in itself, isn't it? But when you look at the grave, what's written on the grave? Well, it's Erie prose. Okay, fair enough. But it says John Vi, supposed to be the name of the priest before Henry Boudet, and all the different writings, but basically it says Mort, and the letters that have been done dug deeper so they stand out is 1 and 7, Br, so it's 17th. So it's Jean Vi, 17th, January the 17th, again, that strange number. And who's buried in here? Well, they opened up to have a look, and there's nobody there. Well, that was a quick romp around Rennes-le-Chateau and the surrounding area. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it gave you some sort of perspective on the whole mystery thing there. So now let's move on to the title of the talk, Bérenger Saunière, Priest Wizard of Rennes-le-Château. This is the new book that I've just wrote with Thomas Sheridan. Now it's going to show, this is what we'll be covering for the remainder of this little talk. So it shows the results of my thoughts over the 20 odd years I've been going down to Rennes-le-Château and taking people around. It seems to be very confusing. The whole thing about Rennes-le-Château is massively confusing. A good few years ago, the Reverend Lionel Fanthorpe was talking at our Mysterious Earth conference, and he said that Rennes-le-Château is like peeling an onion from the inside. Every time you peel one layer away, there's another one and another one. And it also goes out in so many different directions. But one thing to remember is that when you get something that seems to be made so complicated, it's usually because the hub of the matter is very, very simple, and all these things have been put on top of it to confuse the matter, to send you off in directions. But I'm getting ahead of myself here, because like ancient sites, stone circles, that sort of thing, it's not just the site itself that's important, it's the surrounding area. And Saunière was born and brought up in an area of, which seems very, very spiritual centre to it. It was like a pot that Saunière was born, and his ideas were brewed and developed into what we now see as the mystery of Rennes-le-Château. So the study of Rennes-le-Château appears to begin in Alert-les-Bains, which is just down the road from it. It's a small medieval walled town, and it's a centre of esoteric philosophy. And it must be at the heart of everything that happens around the area. As you cross the old stone rickety bridge that spans the River Aude, you feel the centuries begin to disappear as you get transported back to the ancient region of Occitan. It's so easy to imagine the Cathar perfects of the 13th century spreading their message in the covered areas that surround this very small or tiny town square. From here, the picturesque timber frame buildings stretch out along short narrow streets, one of which displays occult symbols carved sometime in antiquity, suggesting esoteric activities of long ago. And it's even rumoured that this was the home, believe it or not, of Nostradamus himself. Right, now my groups have always stayed in the Hôtel L'Evêché, which is the old Bishop's Palace, a beautiful old building. And it sits right there on the River Aude with the remains of the old abbey connected to it. So the historic Occitan lords had strong family connections with the Knights Templar. As Lynn and Clive told us in the Templar Revelation, that Alert-les-Bains was owned by the Knights Templar once upon a time. In fact, the crest of the town of Alert-les-Bains is very similar to the Templar cross. In fact, it contains it within it. The Templars, again, Lynn and Clive helped us with this one. The Templars wanted to have their own independent state, and this was going to be the centre of it, this area. By the time the order was abandoned in 1307, they'd amassed huge land holdings, of which 30% were in the Languedoc. As in many areas of the Languedoc in the 13th century, Alert-les-Bains had a thriving Jewish community, and it was these peaceful and tolerant lands that deep esoteric philosophy was studied and discussed. And it was here that the mystical teachings of Kabbalah, as we know it now, were invented, and a system that is now known worldwide from this little area. It was these very attributes that brought the Languedoc into conflict with kings and popes. And the murderous grab of these lands began by the Pope in Béziers in 1209. Here there were the famous words of Arnold Armory, the papal legate: "Kill them all, God will know his own," resulting in the massacre of the 20,000 inhabitants of the city of Béziers. The armies then went through the Languedoc, killing and maiming in their way, until Montségur fell in 1244, another story which you probably already know about. But then the Inquisition was being held, and that carried on rooting out bits of so-called heresy. And then a few years later, if you think about it, not long, in 1307, the Pope, Clement V, and King Philip le Bel of France declared that the Knights Templar had to be rounded up and abandoned, and that was in 1307. So that basically completed the 200 years existence of the Knights Templar. Now that gives a whole area idea of what happened in the Languedoc. But, question, how did the Knights Templar develop into being this massive conglomerate of businesses with riches that scared both popes and kings? So what did the Templars discover underneath Solomon's Temple that allowed this organisation to just massively blow up? And where did this secret go? So with this question firmly in mind, let's return to Rennes-le-Château and meet the Hatchpool Blanchefort family. These are the lords of Rennes, the historic lords that actually live in the chateau there. Now, the Hatchpool Blancheforts had deep connections to the occult and with many secret societies, as well as royalty. And Bérenger Blanchefort, who was the head of the family in the mid-12th century, had been a long-term member of the Knights Templar. And then in 1256, he got the position of Grand Master of the Templars, a position which he held for 13 years. Now, it's also believed that the Blancheforts had a powerful family secret, a secret that had been passed down through the generations. But unfortunately, a secret that seemed to be reaching a point where there was nobody left to pass it down to, because Mary de Blanchefort, the last of the line, had fallen out with her children. So she had to look to somebody who would understand the importance of this powerful secret. And the person she chose was the Abbé Bigot, Antoine Bigot. Because he was the family priest, or the priest of Rennes-le-Château, in the church which was then the family chapel of the Blanchefort family. So in 1781, when Mary died, the secret had already been given to Antoine Bigot, and he hid it in the church. He would fully understand the ramifications of this secret, and it was hid in the church until whatever time it could be passed on to members of the family again. Now, unfortunately, within 10 years, Bigot himself found himself in trouble because of the French Revolution, and he had to flee over the border into Spain. But he'd hidden the secret beneath the church, and the secret was safe. So this powerful secret that was probably the source of the power and influence of the Blanchefort family, which belonged to a very powerful Knights Templar family, in the land which had been designated as the homeland for the Knights Templar, and now been hidden beneath the church of Rennes-le-Château. Very much like the same original secret of the Knights Templars was hidden under Solomon's Temple. And I would suggest to you that this is the very same secret. So the next player on our mystery stage is Bérenger Saunière himself. Now, he was born on the 1st of April in 1852, and his home was in Montezel, right across the valley from Rennes-le-Château, just a couple of miles as the crow flies. Now, his father Joseph was a very extremely successful and respected businessman. Not only was he the mayor of Montezel, but he also ran the estates for the Marquis de Cazenajau, and he was also the director of the local flour mill. So all these incomes together were enough to provide a good background for Saunière and his brothers and sisters. In fact, his two youngest brothers all had university educations, and one was a lawyer and one was a doctor. So they were a reasonably wealthy, middle-class type of family. So Bérenger was ordained into the priesthood at the age of 27. He spent a little bit of time at the church in Alaban and Leclat before arriving as priest of Rennes-le-Château in 1885 on June the 1st, and by this time he was 33 years old. So on arriving at Rennes-le-Château, Saunière found that the church and the presbytery were in basically a mess. The church was unusable and the presbytery was unlivable. So he set about spending his savings of 600 francs on mending the church roof. But at this time, the Republican movement was, it tasted blood, and they were hotly in pursuit of the church, and anti-clerical feeling was running rife. So it was in this atmosphere that Saunière presented a very pro-royalty speech just before the elections of 1885. This provocative sermon resulted in Saunière being sent off to the seminary in Narbonne as punishment. But it did prove his royal loyalty, or his loyalty to the royal cause. But whilst he was in the metropolis, he met up often with his brother Alfred, who was also a priest. But Alfred was working for the Marquis de Chateaubriand as tutor to his children. So it is at this point that fate played its hand, in a way that rocked Saunière's life, as I said, reverberations down through time to this very day. Now the chain of events began almost a generation ago with a connection between the Saunière family and the Chateaubriand dynasty, which started when Bérenger's father had gone into service with the Count. So the Marquis de Chateaubriand had been a great personal friend of the late Comte de Schomberg, the heir to the throne of France himself, who had just recently turned down the opportunity to rule France under the title of Henry V. Even more importantly, his widow, the Countess de Schomberg, was still alive, and she was a member of the Habsburg family, one of the most powerful families on the planet. And it was with this connection that Saunière was reinstated back to Rennes-le-Château. And when he arrived back in the village in 1886, he had a personal gift of 3,000 gold francs from the Countess de Schomberg herself, the heir to the throne of France. And he had arrived back with a mission to rediscover, I say, the secrets of the Habsburg Blanchefort family. So on arriving back in the village, he recommenced his work on the church and on the presbytery, and eventually it became time to remove the lovely old carved wooden pulpit support and throw it out onto the tip. And it's in this process that a file fell out of a purposely carved slot in the top of the pulpit support. And within this file were various parchments. So Saunière tried to decipher the parchments, but got nowhere. He asked Bishop Billard, for his help, and Billard himself, he could find no translation. So he was sent off to the seminary in Saint-Sulpice to the experts in translation of ancient and esoteric occult documents. The Director General of Saint-Sulpice was the Abbé Bellel, and he introduced Saunière to the many secret societies and occult organisations that proliferated in Paris at the time. And Saunière was very warmly welcomed into this inner sanctum. In particular, Saunière became extremely close to the opera singer Emma Calvé, who was known worldwide at the time. Now, Emma Calvé came from an occult family. She actually bought a property called the Château de Cabrières in 1894. Now, this had been the place that had previously held the occult document and text Abraham the Jew, which had been formerly owned by Nicholas Flamel himself. And this particular document was held in secret in the chateau for many, many years. So on his return to Rennes-le-Château, Saunière would now be very well versed in the history of and the connection to many secret societies that the Blancheforts and the Royals were also associated in. For example, there was the Philadelphians, the Rite of Memphis, the Rite of Memphis in Vienna, the legitimate Masonic Lodge of La Sagris, the Wisdom Lodge, the Order of the Rose Cross and the Temple of the Grail. And then in 1888, the three occultists, one of which was the famous Papas, instigated the Kabbalistic Order of the Royal Cross. Then in 1891, the year that Saunière was to make his discovery, this saw the onset of the organisation known as the Order of the Temple and the Kabbalistic Order of the Royal Cross. And that particular one, I think, was of some significance. So Saunière returned back to Rennes-le-Château with this new body of knowledge. The first thing he did was to uplift a curbstone or a paving stone in the middle of the aisle in front of the altar in the church to reveal these amazingly beautiful Carolingian carvings. The stone got eventually called the Knight's Stone and hangs in the museum now. But at this point, Saunière's life changed. He immediately sacked all the builders and sent them home. And in that evening, he wrote an enigmatic note in his diary. Letter from Grants. Discovered a tomb. Rain in the evening. So he'd hidden this massively important discovery between two unimportant subjects. But from this point on, Saunière was massively rich. His restoration program of the church turned into a development. He bought 6 houses, all of which he had demolished, and on his grounds he created his own domain. He built some beautiful gardens, and these gardens were to be complete with plants from throughout the world and exotic animals from throughout the world. He also had 2 towers built, and an orangery and the Tour Magdala with a beautiful walkway with views all over the valley. He completed the work on the presbytery where he and his housekeeper, Marie de Renaud, would live. And he had the Villa Bethania finished, a fine house which was just used to house his visitors. And then, of course, there was a renovation and decoration of the church. In there now, from the pictures we saw earlier, you remember the huge, brightly coloured statues and the brightly coloured paintings around the church of areas around the area of Rennes-le-Château, and little hints and ideas here and there that Saunière put out to us. But also, of course, there was the Asmodeus statue on the way into the church. The first thing you see as you pass into Saunière's inner domain. Now that's important to us, and we'll come back to it very shortly. And then, of course, there was Saunière's opulent lifestyle, because this matched a man of massive wealth living in this wonderful domain that he was living in. He gave really exotic banquets very often, and to people of great importance from all over Europe. In the Bérenger Saunière book, I found a list of the food that he presented at one of these banquets. I found it from the Jean-Luc Robin book. So this is what one of his banquets involved. Innumerable entrees including frog roe, lobster, shellfish, 3 fish dishes, 2 of poultry, and 3 roasts, lamb, beef and pork, and to finish, a dozen desserts. Fine clarets, liqueurs of which the Abbé was extremely fond, flowed freely. To finish, there was Martinique rum, which he imported directly in the cask. And to accompany the rum, naturally, there were Havana cigars. What a life, what a life. So the question we asked right at the beginning was, how did Bérenger Saunière manage to become massively wealthy? So we've gathered quite a lot of evidence now, so let's look at it, let's look at this evidence. But first of all, we just need to distance ourselves from the Magdalene story and the Rex Deus lineage. Now, as well, this is probably true, it's just not part of our story here. It's not part of the question we've asked. I mean, if I was to ask you, how did Bérenger become massively rich? And you said, well, Jesus married somebody 2,000 years ago. That doesn't really answer the question, does it? In fact, it's not even the same subject. So, whilst the Magdalene's story might be perfectly true, it's just not part of our terms of reference. So many years ago, when I first entered the church at Rennes Chateau, it struck me as all was not as it seemed. And in my first book, Mysteries of the Cathar Country, I wrote, a curious glance at the church reveals a Catholic chapel, albeit rather congested. But under more intensive examination, the signs of a Masonic or Rosicrucian temple begin to appear from beneath this authentic veneer. So first, let's have a look at the Asmodeus statue that stands at the door of the church as if to welcome you into Saunière's domain. You're confronted here by the imposing figure of Asmodeus, king of the demons, taking the weight of an imposing statue. So this piece of art hides what now appears to be at the heart of Saunière's secret. Peeling away the first level reveals the 4 elements of alchemy, which are shown right here in the statue. Asmodeus, as Rex Mundi, is the lord of the earth, first element. Above him is the water stoop, second element. Above them are salamanders, which represent fire, the third element. And above those are the angels, which are pure air, the fourth element. But above this is the Rosicrucian cross. Now this represents spirit or Shin, and this is the 5th element. So now we have a pentagram. We have a pentagram, and as in Venus, we have the morning star, the light bringer. We have Lucifer, as represented by Asmodeus. So, by placing Asmodeus in a position of holding up all the other elements, Saunière appears to be telling the visitor to the church that this king of demons controls all that happens here. Now, although Asmodeus, being the king of the demons and custodian of secrets, has enormous power, he was nevertheless captured by King Solomon and forced to obey him through the power of a magic ring. So did Saunière also learn a way to control Asmodeus, the king of demons, with the use of a magic ring or something? Now, the position adopted by the finger on the right hand of Asmodeus clearly indicates a ring very suggestive of this. If this is not enough evidence, then Saunière openly tells you in the writing just below the angels. This phrase usually reads, Parsi signitu vaincra, by this sign you shall conquer. But in Saunière's usual way of just twisting things slightly to change the meaning, he added the word le. So now it reads, Parsi signi te vaincre, or by this sign you shall conquer him, or by this ring you shall conquer Asmodeus. Now this would suggest that Asmodeus is showing the observer a ringed finger, and that when designing the statue, Saunière is again hiding in plain sight the fact that Solomon and he could control the demon with magic, maybe a ring. So I would argue that through this rediscovery of certain magical texts or grimoires, Saunière learned how to harness and control Asmodeus, the king of the demons, much as Solomon had done, to build his temple and to grow his wealth of both physical money and wisdom. So taking evidence from certain magical texts or grimoires, the best known of these being the Less of Kier Solomon, or the Lemegeton, and the Great of Kier Solomon. So the supernatural powers of Asmodeus can be very useful to a magician or a sorcerer who can avail him by procuring his earthly services. Asmodeus can be lured by extravagant banquets, formal gardens, and the trappings of luxury and opulence. These are the things that are said to attract Asmodeus. Now consider this in the context of the staggering, luxurious banquets held by Bérenger Saunière in his magnificent domain. These were not merely crude trappings of wealth and gluttony and extravagance. There were sacrifices given to Asmodeus in order to lure him into Saunière's mountain-top temple, and from this procure his supernatural abilities. In other words, the Abbé Bérenger Saunière became a magical contractor in the services of the French aristocracy, enticing Asmodeus into his utopian earthly paradise. He could indeed be called a shepherd of Arcadia, within his created opulent bounty of splendour. So now, at the end of this journey, I hope we can provide an equally precise answer to this question which has been floating in the air for nearly half a century. From where did Saunière derive his great and massive wealth? Whatever Saunière discovered in the crypt beneath the church has enabled him to contact and work with Asmodeus, the king of demons, who was probably once just a pagan god. Now we don't know exactly what he discovered, but it was probably ancient magical grimoires, magical workings, and probably artifacts as well. Whether it was Solomon's ring, well, we don't know, but it was something with magical power connected to this whole Asmodeus working. And then Saunière went ahead and built a temple, a pagan temple to Asmodeus at Rennes Chateau, where he carried out these ancient magical workings. And this is what led to Saunière's massive wealth. So one final thing about the workings of Solomonic magic. We know that the pentagrams are at the basis of the Solomonic magic. They are fundamental to it. Probably 44 pentagrams. And then remember, Henry Lincoln would speak of pentagrams in the landscape. Many landscape pentagrams all round Rennes Chateau. But I would say that the pentagrams weren't in the landscape. The pentagrams were in the church. The pentagrams were in the domain. Don't look out. Don't be misdirected. Look back. Now, of course, a clever ruse of some organisations in situations like this would be to misdirect, but within this misdirection you would include part of the truth, the pentagram, but you would point the wrong direction. So the truth is in there, but not the exact truth that would lead you to the answer. And one other thing, a distorted geographical image, a distorted pentagram, well, this indicates a total reversal of the truth in magic. You can look, but can you see? So that's the end of my Rennes Chateau journey. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you want to get in touch with me, or the tours, or the books, or whatever, my hub is megalithic-tours.com. My contact details are there. The main thing I do is megalithic tours, obviously, so I do tours to ancient and mystical sites all year round. On the website, click on the tours timetable, everything's in there. All my books. This talk was about Bérenger Saunière, Priest Wizard of Rennes Chateau. That's on my website, as is my first book, Associated Mysteries of Cathar Country. I've got 8 books altogether. You can buy those off the website. I'll send them to you. And you can book the tours. Oh, and the Mysterious Earth Conference. This is important because it's only a month off. So we've got some fantastic speakers, including Lynn and Clive. And this is over the weekend of the 7th and 8th of September. We're in the lovely seaside resort of St Anne's-on-Sea in Lancashire. Not far from Blackpool, easy to get to, just connections through Preston. There's a Mysterious Earth Conference connection on the website, just click onto that, all the information's there, and you can book there as well. So that's it, and I'll just say thank you to Geraldine and everybody at the Atlantic Bookshop, and hope to see you soon.